how did you get started in business? I mean, I know you didn't just jump right into building Barnum,
Nope.
but I love to hear. The reason I started the show is I love to hear about people's journey, and
Sure.
in them sharing their journey, it helps a lot of other people that may be exactly where you were or where you are.
Yep. So the quick story is, my dad was by far my biggest critic, but my biggest fan, right? So to me, he criticized me always, right? He'd
Typical
go,
Italian, right?
yep, and I go 4 for 4. He called everybody big guy, so I would, in theory, call him big guy. So I get in the car, you go 4 for 4 in a high school game, let's say, and I go, big guy, good game today, and he goes, the first inning you hit a base hit to left center, you dogged it going to first, the guy bobbled it, you should be standing on second. You're never going to go play college like that. Or then in center, like, who the hell told you in the 6th inning that you can catch with one hand in center field? Like, I didn't teach you that.
Wow.
And I'd say, you're right. And, I always took it as constructive, but all he talked about was when he was not with me, he was boastful about my career, right? So my mom we grew up with very little. My mom's working 2 jobs. At the time, she's going to her second job was at Jenny Craig, the weight loss place.
Okay.
In Brooklyn, and this guy is picking up his wife who is doing it just to get out of the house. The guy's crushing it in this business as a leader in Brooklyn. And so every night when he goes to pick up his wife, my dad's there, they're BSing outside. And all my dad's talking about is like my junior year of college, my season, how it's going. And they go out to dinner one night, and the guy says to my parents, the number one question was, what's Paul going to do when he gets out of school? And my parents, like I said, didn't have anything. And I trained really hard. I was always the hardest worker in any athletic that I did, not in school, but in athletics. So my dad said to me, I'll give you pocket money, but you got to get to college. And, I don't have the money to pay for you. So when he asked that, they said, oh, he's never worked a day in his life. But he said, yeah, but he's a good athlete. He's driven, he's focused. And he talked about going into the insurance business at the time it was. And so when I get out of school, my mom forces me to send him my resume, and I meet with the manager. The manager ran track for Wagner.
Okay.
He was about 30, very successful. And it was kind of like, at the time, you could have your own franchise in this business, right? Which I was intrigued by. I wanted my own business, but you have no money.
Yeah.
You need a few $1,000, couple of suits, and a car. And I went in, and then he asked me this great question, right, during the interview. And I still talk to him every Saturday. And he said, where do you see yourself in 5 years? And we always kid, but he says, I was cocky. I said, I was confident. I said, well, how long did it take you to get to that chair? And he said, he gave me his path. And I said, I want to do the same thing. So that's how I got in. And I ended up going in the leadership track because I was intrigued by I always led. I was always captain. I always built teams and was a leader. So I wanted to lead people.
Yeah, that's cool, man. What would you say? What were some of the key pieces of advice that he gave you that sort of set you on your way? Anything that you still hold today?
Yeah, I think what happens is in anything you do, there's a formula of success, right? So, as a strength coach, there was a process that you put people through. And, we all say this thing like, enjoy the journey, enjoy the process. But there's that formula that's part of the process. So when he taught it, he said to me, he said, what do you want to make? And I thought the wealthiest people in the world, I came from nothing, made $100,000. So I said, I want to make 100. Right? I said, I want to make 100,000. And he said, why do you say that? I said, because in college, they said only 2% makes 100,000, 3% makes 75. I want to be in the top 2%. So long story short, he said, this is what you have to do. And then I questioned him on it. I said, all right, so if I do this, this, and this, you mean to tell me I'm going to make that? And he said, yeah. And I did. So I thought that, and I think that that's where the upbringing of an athlete, I always tell people, like, I played baseball, football, but you think about baseball, it's a tie game. You get up at the plate in the top of the ninth, you strike out on a good 3-2 pitch. You got to run in the outfield and make a play.
Yeah.
and you got to shake that off pretty quickly. So I understood, failing to succeed, and getting better on each thing and learning from your last at bat or your last mistake.
Mm.
And I think that really helped me to have the mentality for the business.
Paul, what was your age when he started working with you and he showed you that plan?
Oh, I was 22 years old, almost 23.
Yeah. So you know what I find so cool about that is you were very coachable and also very open-minded, and not like
Correct.
a typical stubborn 21, 22-year-old where that's great, but I got my own way, or I'm going to find my own way. You
Yeah, and I think and Dana, I think a lot goes back to coaches and parents, right?
yeah.
Like for me, and like my mom used to say to me, you have two ears and one mouth. Use them accordingly, right? So and when someone that had showed success already, right? He was 30 and he was already at the highest level in that time in a small business. It was 20 advisors,
Mm.
but that's where I wanted to follow. So if you saw someone that was doing something really well, you try to emulate them, right? So that's what I did.
No, that's cool. At what point, so how long did you end up working in that organization before you said, you know what, I'm going to really just separate. I'm going to start my own thing.
Yeah. So what happened was I was there for about a little over 24 months, 2.5 years. And what happened at the time was there was lots of firms that in the industry where if someone wasn't succeeding, they would give you an opportunity. So it's a really interesting story. I got put into like a leadership path, right? After 9 months, I get interviewed for two firms in Brooklyn. At the time, I had my fiance and myself were moving out of Brooklyn, like most people did at that era, going to Jersey, right? We wanted the trees. And this regional VP says I interview for the first two agencies and he doesn't give it to me. And I was pretty pissed. And he made a comment to me. He said, the next one's yours. And, I'm a Brooklyn kid. And if you give your word, that's what you live by. So
Well,
I
you
paid
have, right?
attention, right? I paid attention to this board that was there. And you could see the firms. And this one firm wasn't doing well. It was in Staten Island. So he called me into his office. And I walked in and I said, I'll take it. He said, take what? And I said, it was called South Shore. And he goes, I don't know if I'm going to give it to you. I said, well, how could you not give it to me? I said, the next one's yours. And he didn't, long story short. So he gave me permission to start interviewing other markets. And I interviewed in Manhattan and in Westchester and Connecticut.
Mm.
And this place, Barnum, was only 9 people, 9 advisors, 12 employees. We have about 525 now.
Wow.
And it was bankrupt. And they called me on a Friday. They said, it's mine. I start Monday. And I took a shot and came up here blind faith,
Wow.
and just knew I had this vision. And I think I came up here with the idea of I just wanted to prove myself. And then maybe I'd go back. And I loved it here. I loved the people. And I started to build that family culture. And then I never left. And I've been here 27 years.
That's cool, man.
Yeah.
When you came up there and you said you had something to prove, I always love to understand people's headspace. Were
Yeah.
you working from a place where you had a little bit of a chip on your shoulder? Like, I'll prove it to you guys that I'm your
Big
guy?
chip, big
Yeah.
chip on my shoulder. And, anyone that knows me says never challenge him or make him do something and tell him he can't do something. Right. And, I feel like, once again, another dadism, I always said I should write a book on that, but he would always say to me, playing football in the 80s, even baseball, it was a big man's game. I'm lucky if with my shoes on, I'm 5'8", right?
Yeah.
So that was not big at that time. And I played running back. Most of them was 6'2", and the prototypical. Now I'm the prototypical running back, right?
Yep.
But my dad used to say, remember, everyone puts their pants on the same way, one leg at a time. So it's about hard work and heart and all that. So I always had a little bit of a chip as an athlete. So I just carried that into business. So I came up here and, I had that vision. I think it's good to have a chip, but you have to have a vision. So I had this vision of what I wanted to get to. And obviously that kept moving because no one was this big. And then I had this chip that I still have today. Like it's a good way, in a good way. I wasn't being mean about it. but
Yeah.
I wanted to make sure people understood. And all he had to say to me, this regional guy, was he sent me a letter probably a year in. I still have it in my desk somewhere. If I look around, I can dig it out. But he said, probably the worst mistake of my career. And I was good. The chip was over,
There
you
you
know?
go. Right. It's funny as you're talking about this. One of the chapters in a book that I wrote was, do you love to win or do you hate to lose? And I took that from Derek Jeter, and he said,
Yep.
listen, everybody loves to win, and people that love to win, I don't want on my team. I want the
Yep.
guys that hate to lose. Because
And what, the team that I played, as I was telling you earlier, the team that I played on after college baseball, we would always start, and all D1 guys that played this ball together, we would all get in there and we would say, be afraid, afraid to lose. And that was our thing. We had a fear of losing, right? So I agree with you on that.
yeah, it's amazing how it can keep you hungry and
Yep.
keep you motivated. That's, in business today, there's very interesting. I work with a lot of founders like you that are just getting it going. You started and you just kept running. And I
Yes.
find it's a very different mentality with a founder mentality versus, let's just say, an appointed C-suite, starting at the
Yeah.
top. It's a different
Yep.
attitude and it's a different energy. So I
It's a
appreciate.
really, it's a really good point. And what I've tried to do here is I've tried to create all my employees are founders of their departments. And I've had this mentality where they're empowered to run their business. And as long as it's in where vision is and our value system, I've created that mentality. And that's how, I kind of think about football is the best sport for that.
Mm.
And I use sports analogies all the time, but like that long snapper, maybe not as important as the quarterback, but that's an important person on a 53-man roster.
Oh yeah.
Just like our internal staff, the 100+ people that help my advisors, from the guy that's doing the mail to my most important, chief technology officer, they all have a value that they bring, and they have to be the best at what they do. So I think you get that in a founder mentality.
Oh yeah. And it's interesting when you talk about founder mentality, chip on your shoulder. What I found interesting is, you're in a space in financial services that's it's crowded, and there are some, big Nike like players in the space.
Yep.
So what I wanted to ask you was, were you ever intimidated by some of the bigger players in financial services, or were you so laser focused on the niche that you were carving out that it didn't even matter?
It didn't matter, but I remember early on, one of the major things I did when I first got here was I looked around, and obviously what I'll say is the pure firms or the pure companies 25 years ago was different than the ones today.
Hmm.
And I was more regional than I am now national. But I looked at the firms around and I said, all right, and I looked at what they did, right? So what was their like niche, or what were they recruiting to? And how are they attracting talent? And I couldn't compete with them because I didn't have the money they had. So
Yeah.
I said, what am I going to do? And I came up with a pretty cool niche. And I wrote a lot about this in the business. Was we're in a business where you have to see people, right? And that's the key. So I thought I was in the insurance space, but I believe it was financial services. So my phrase was a marketing firm that does financial planning.
Okay.
And what I figured out was no one else knew this. I would ask an advisor, close your eyes and tell me the 3 things you need to grow your business. You're here, you want to get here.
Mm.
And always in the top 3 would be, I need to get in front of more clients.
Yeah.
So I would say, if I can help you do that. And so I built this organization that helps advisors get in front of clients. And today, I won't even call them, I don't like the word leads, because I don't think there really are. Leads are different. They're almost cold.
Yeah.
I generate over 1 million opportunities for my FAs.
Wow, that's cool.
So that different. Then I have all the intellectual capital around it. So in the beginning, it was generating that, and then you build the rest. So I think if you can look at your competition and be unique and different, and you gave an example of Nike, look at some of the people that came into that space that have competed with them, right? Like leisure wear, where like Lulu comes out of nowhere,
Yeah.
and Nike either has to meet them in the middle somewhere to compete,
Yeah, no, it's interesting that you say that. One of my buddies is Kevin Plank, who started Under Armour,
Sure.
and his mentality, founder mentality, scrapper mentality,
Yep.
athlete mentality. You guys are very, very similar in trying to go into its market disruption.
Yes.
And it's pretty cool that you rely on that sports background and the lessons from your youth, right, to power you through. Because I would say entrepreneurship, no matter what field you're in, it requires a lot of energy, horsepower, resilience, and
Yes.
really you can't quit.
And I think you have to have that. You have to have that horse mentality, right? You have to also be willing. There's nothing you can't be willing to do.
Hmm.
And I think that's what happens, right? As an athlete, I look at your role. If I went in, if I was playing baseball and I was struggling to do something athletically, and you gave me the right drills to do, now I have a choice to do it or not.
Yeah.
And I think, if you have to clean the bathrooms when you start a firm, get dirty, work those hours and to show people, I think that's important too. And you think about Under Armour, like they're always been known as for their culture, right?
Yep.
Culture doesn't cost a lot of money. It just takes a lot of time and values and really you helping build that and shape it. So
Yeah.
I think that's a critical thing too, especially when you're newer too.
Oh yeah. I know I keep sort of going back into your journey, but when you were starting this whole thing, right? You only had 9 advisors and you. How did you deal with the fact that like how did you manage your desire to grow against the reality of where you were?
Yeah,
'Cause that's tough.
that was really hard. That was really hard. And also when you're a new leader, and you have this level of, um, you know, being up here, people would say my Brooklynese comes out when my intensity level goes up, right? But
Yeah.
I had to learn how to channel that. And that was different, right? When you're some guys on the field are more eccentric, or like I was always that guy that would take someone out on a slide or have a hard hit, rile up the team.
Yep.
And that doesn't work that way in business sometimes. And you
Mm.
have to change that mentality. So that was hard. That was hard in the beginning. And trying to find mentors and people outside of the industry that were successful that I could talk to about that was really important to me too, or read about it, right? Dale Carnegie says the 2 things I just nailed was, he said it. He said, I thought I said this. I used to use this line all the time. And he said that nothing changes in life except in the next 5. What will change in life in the next 5 years is the people you meet or the books you read,
Mm.
right? So I was doing both of those things to try to learn how to channel my energy properly to not run over people either, right? You couldn't
Yeah.
do that either. And then, this, you're trying to get buy-in. You're trying to get them to see the vision. And, the coolest thing for me in my life, even as a young boy, was, and I saw this in athletics. And as I reflect back, you see this now, now I get to do it in business, is people hit what I'll call the ceiling of complexity in life, right? So the kid playing baseball is only able to, he can't hit a curveball. But if you can work and teach them and help them and coach them and inspire them to work on it, they can do that as long as they have some of that talent. And when children hit that, they stop playing.
Mm.
And I think in business, sometimes you hit that, then you get stagnant. And another one of my dadisms was, whenever you hit a peak, don't peak. If you peak, then the only thing that's left is valley,
Yeah.
right? So I try in business now with my advisors and my staff and people I coach outside, is when they're getting to that ceiling of complexity, if they want to break through, help them to break through it and then see that big jump in their business.
Yeah. No, I love that. I love what you just said. I want to ask you, based on that, are there some common threads that you see amongst people that think that they're at their ceiling?
Yeah. And I think sometimes it is, we talked about it earlier, like when you think of steps to success, I think of steps and I say, it's not, you're not here and you don't go from step 1 to step 12.
Yeah.
That's why they're called steps. So you got to keep doing what you did here and keep building, right? So I think what ends up happening is people get to this level, whatever that level is in business, and then they forgot what they did sometimes. And you got to do those, and then you got to add to what you did. So right now is a cool time. I run around in almost every conversation. I'm like, "Are you cheating right now? Are you cheating?" And they're like, "What do you mean cheating?" I'm like, "Come on, you know what I mean. Are you working on 2021 so that when you turn the page, you added new things into your business to help it grow?" All I'm basically saying is, are you fighting through this? Are you layering on top of where you are so you keep the growth going?
Yeah.
And it's the end of the year, so cheat a little bit. Get that edge, right?
Yeah.
You know, and in business, Dana, which is interesting, which is very different than athletics, is there's no off season.
Yeah.
So you have to be building as a corporate athlete. You have to be building at the same time as you're growing and running. So you have to almost be like doing it while you're on that treadmill, you know?
Yeah. I love that. Now, how important would you say it is to also maybe spend a little bit of time on the step? Because I think today there's a lot of preaching out there about that, business 24/7, 365. If you're not working and hustling, you're going to get beat. Somebody else is going to win that race, if you will. But there's also got to be points, I would think, in your business where you should stay on that step for a quick minute and think about, here's where I am, right? I mean, that's just.
I think I agree with you. I agree with you. And I think one of the things that we lack, and there's some cultures that are what you said, right? You can't leave because everyone else is still there. I think, I stole it and I use it from Vince Lombardi, right? Vince Lombardi, they said to him, you're winning and winning and winning, greatest football coach at the time. And he said, "What do you do?" And he said, "Well, you have the best football players." He said, "No, I have the best men."
Yeah.
So I think what I've tried to do is I've tried to help my employees or anyone I work with to be a complete person. So I think if they're getting better at home, father, mother, brother, sister, if they're staying in fitness and shape, if they're doing the things they like to do, that's going to power them through the business.
Yeah.
And I think that's important because then you're okay with taking a step back to go forward. And I think that complete person helps with that.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great thing too, because, there's a lot of leaders out there that say they want to be great leaders, but they don't actually invest in their people development.
Correct.
And then you have all these incomplete people that make up your organization. And then you say, hey, why does my culture suck? How come we're not pushing and able to go get that extra yard? And they may not have the horsepower.
You're right. And what's interesting is we're supposed to help as leaders people get through obstacles, right? But those personal obstacles or those health obstacles, we really can't help as much.
Yeah.
So if we could avoid those by teaching them how to be a complete person, then you can focus on what you're good at, is the obstacles that are in your field, right? So I think if I have the right mindset, right, we use a lot of the Carol DeWitt growth mindset. If I can help them with that growth mindset, but they should have a growth mindset in everything that they want to do in their lives. They should be getting better, right? Peak, there's valley. So if you want to get better, if we can help them to work on that, they then become better employees and they're more focused and driven and inspired and all that good stuff.
Yeah. And then when you wring out that sponge, it all, like you said, it translates to a better winning, I like to say, champion-like culture.
It does. Big time. Big time.
What would you say? What's your favorite part about being an entrepreneur and being a leader?
I would say pretty simple. It's impacting lives. It's the lives that I get to impact on a daily basis. The freedom to do that. And the other thing is that's really cool is I get to be me. Like I'm who I am. I don't, so when I introduce myself a lot of times and they say, "Where are you from?" I said, I'm a kid from the streets of Brooklyn. I grew up there and learned a lot of things from that. I think that that's important to stay who you are, and understand your settings and act appropriate to where you're supposed to be, but also be yourself.
Yeah. No, it's
Appropriate for you.
It's cool. I mean, listen, if you're yourself, that's the best person to be.
Correct.
You know,
And listen, and Dana, as I was telling you earlier, my dad was my hardest critic. But what he created in me, my dad passed away in '99, but he left behind that critic in myself, right? So I'm always looking at myself in anything I do each day as I leave the office or now work from home, wherever I may be. I'm always saying, how did my day go? Did I get better today? How did I perform? And I'm pretty hard on myself with that,
Yeah. So that's interesting because a lot of times too, we could be so hard on ourselves that it actually becomes a performance inhibitor.
Yeah.
How do you manage that intense critic with also bouts of reality?
Yeah, it's funny. I'll give you an example of one recently that was pretty funny. It was just total personal, right? So I'm not a runner.
Yeah.
I've run maybe 3 5Ks in my life, and I always ran as an athlete, but I'm not going to run distances. So back this time last year, my middle daughter, who goes to Boston College, she says, "Hey, Dad, you want to run a race with me?" I had just ran. She had a charity event at school, and I ran a 5K.
Okay.
So it was like a week later, and she asked me to do her a favor. She needed more runners. So I said, all right, no problem. I went up there and I ran it. So she calls me like the next week and says, "Hey, Dad, you want to run a race with me?" I said, "Sure." But I said, "I'm going to train this time, Sid." I'm not going to just wing it, right? I want to try to do better than I did. So I said, "You want to run for time? When is it?" So she says, "It's in January." Oof. So she says, "No, I just want to finish." I said, "What do you mean just finish?" She goes, "It's a half marathon." I said, "No, there's a chance. This body does not do half marathons.
This body's built for speed, not distance."
Yeah, I'm not doing it. I lift too much. I'm going to end up pulling muscles. I won't be able to deadlift or squat. So she says, "Come on, Dad." So I did it. So long story short, it was the Disney half that was this January. So I trained, and I never ran before. I didn't ask any questions. So I thought about it, and I said, all right, my goal is going to be 2 hours. And someone said, 2 hours? That's pretty aggressive for a guy never doing it. Why'd you pick that? I said, because I don't want to run more than 2 hours. And that was it. That was my only logic, right? So I started just training. I didn't learn. I didn't pay attention to anything, running on the treadmills, little by little. And so about 2 weeks before my daughter drops out, didn't run it. So I'm all in. So my wife and daughter go with me. And I made a lot of mistakes. But long story short, you got to be there early. I do the race, and I have my Apple Watch on, and I'm clocking myself. And with 3 miles to go, I'm at like a minute 58. So I'm like, all right, I got this thing. And that was it. I hit the wall, but
wow.
I overran. There was a lot of lessons learned, but long story short, the point to your question was when I hit the finish line, I did 2:09. And you had a pretty long walk before I got to my wife and my daughter. They were kind of watching me because I was a little wild. I was probably dehydrated a little bit. But after I got a drink and stuff, but I was emotional. And my wife and daughter give me a big hug and they go, "What's the matter?" And I said, "I missed my goal." And my wife goes, "You crazy? Like you did 2:09. That's amazing." I said, I needed to do 2 hours. And I was mad because I don't know if I'll ever do that again. And I wish I would have made my goal, but I know 5 things I would have done differently. And I use some of those metaphors in business because like you would think when you run on the track, right, you run on the inside.
Yeah.
But when we got out of the gate, there's thousands of people. There's like 30,000 people. People were running on the grass. And I'm like, where the hell is this guy going? But they were staying on the inside. I was going to the left to get water when I had to make a right turn.
Got it.
So I ran 0.6 of a mile too long.
Mm.
So I wasn't properly prepared for that. But what my point is, I missed my goal, but I moved right on, right? I knew it.
Yeah.
I'm still mad. I'm still bothered by it because I'm talking about it still.
That's all right.
9 months
This
later.
is therapy too.
Yeah. But it's a mentality, right?
Yep.
So I think what you end up doing is you have to understand, and I love Simon Sinek's book. Simon Sinek wrote The Infinite Game.
Mm.
And he talks about like what we just, fitness is infinite, right? You don't win fitness. It's a lifelong journey. You don't win being in good shape. You
Right.
don't win life. But baseball's finite.
Yep.
Chess is finite. So I think we in life don't understand the difference, because you might win the year, but that's not life. So you have to just keep winning, right?
Yeah, which is interesting because, you know, so many of us are conditioned. We love starts and stops. We love
Correct.
beginning and an end.
Yes.
And to your point earlier too, even about business, you know, this is the thing too. Entrepreneurship is such a hot topic right now, and it's cool. It's the cool thing to be an entrepreneur. But you also have to ask yourself the question, am I ready to compete 365 for the next 30, 40 plus
Yeah.
years, right?
It's endless. But you got it. And he uses he uses fitness in the book, and he says the person that goes for a 90-day sprint and gets in great shape, then stops, then does it again, then stops and starts, versus the guy that just goes 20 minutes every day for the rest of their life will get in better shape.
Yeah.
And that's business, right? You know,
Yep.
I always kid people, being an entrepreneur or solving a problem. Like I always say to my team, how do you eat an elephant?
One
And
bite
it's
at a time, right?
one bite at a time, right? So you have to understand that once you get here, you got another bite and another bite and another bite and another bite. And if you don't like that, it's hard to be an entrepreneur.
Yeah, and I think that's where a lot of entrepreneurs go wrong in a lot of different things, in a lot of different ways, because it's again, we're being sold this fast strategy to growth today. It's right, go see this expert, you know, this hacker, he'll tell you how to go from A to B faster than Paul could do it. Meanwhile, you've done it and he has a theory on it. So this
Yes.
is, I think there's a lot of people, young entrepreneurs specifically, I'm gearing this little segment too,
Sure.
that get jammed up because they feel like they're not going fast enough, and it's more about speed than excellence.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. And I think, and listen, I think that all happened too with the technology world, right? I think that changed the game too. And once again, as we spoke earlier, they're looking at the 0.1%
Yeah.
of person that did that, and they get romanced into that, versus the person that just continues on that journey, right?
Yep. And I think too, a lot of people have become somewhat numb to process, right? I mean, I listen to people speak today. People talk about $100 million plus or $1 billion like it's nothing.
It's so funny you said that. I use that. I say the same thing, and they don't realize that.
Yeah, because that 100,000 that you were talking about back in Brooklyn,
Yep,
it's still a mile marker, and
it
it's
is
still
big time.
difficult to make for some
I agree.
people.
I agree 100%. I agree. And depending on the field you go into, they talk more and more, and that gets the mentality of the entrepreneur to not understand the process and the journey.
Yeah. So how I want to ask you this. I just have a couple of quick ones for you. How do you deal with failure, whether it's because of your own expectations are too high or something just didn't go right? How do you manage your own emotional state as it relates to, let's say, not getting it done the way you feel that it should have gotten done?
I guess the first thing I always do is I try to understand why,
Okay.
right? Because I think that's important, because, you know, it's all those isms out there, right? If you fail, like I've learned as an entrepreneur, one, to fail fast,
Mm-hmm.
versus, you know, when I was younger, I maybe let it linger, and it's more of a hemorrhage than a failure, right? So fail fast, but then understand why, and then get better at it, right? Sometimes you just have a bad idea,
Yeah.
but, you know, I once again, I learned this. My dad would say, you know, learn things to do from some people and things not to do, right? So sometimes you work with leaders and you say, oh, I wouldn't do this, this, and this, but then you learn a few things, right? But he was entrepreneurial, but he never did anything entrepreneurial, because he always got stuck on the how to.
Yeah.
So what I would say is, think it through and do it. But then if you don't succeed if it's an idea or a role, understand why, so you don't go down that path again. And then think, sometimes you just don't think it through, or take that learning and apply it somewhere else.
Yeah. I love that, getting stuck in the how to, because you could, draw it out on paper, you can over strategize, and then you go into
Correct.
contemplation. And before you know it, you've depleted yourself of energy, but you haven't actually taken any action.
You
And
haven't
that's
done
probably
anything.
the biggest failure.
And he would always say to me, like when I went in this business, he was like, I blew it. I didn't know you could make good money in that business. And he goes, Prudential interviewed me in 64. I should have done it. And he
Wow.
said that like hundreds of times about hundreds of different things. But I learned that because he would always overthink it. And then
Mm.
he would just basically paralyze himself.
Yeah, that's interesting. I appreciate how you said that, the how to. That jams so many people up. And it's like, you were better off just doing it, learning or failing or growing and
Correct.
succeeding. Just if you spend too much time on the sidelines trying to figure out how to play the game.
Right. And then fail fast. If you're
Yeah.
going to fail fast so you move on to the next thing.
No, I love that. So I want to talk to you real quick about your day, right?
Yep.
You're in great shape. We talked before. You still see yourself as an athlete. You still prioritize your fitness. How do you manage, your day, your personal life, your fitness, and manage this great company that you built at the same time?
Yeah. So, very much creature of habit. So the pandemic has been very interesting for that because that changed that whole thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
On that first Monday, it was the first time in probably almost 30 years that I didn't leave the house at 4:30 and go to the gym.
To do chest and tries?
Yeah, not on Mondays because everyone else does that.
Oh
So
yeah, you're a Tuesday guy.
come on, you gotta change that around. But the point is so typically my normal day, still today, it's 4:30 up and right into fitness, right? So 30 to 45 minutes of cardio, and then weights, 6 days a week. So that's very much structured. Laid out at night is the clothes for the day is laid out, the workout clothes, the supplements are all laid out. It's all structured because Dr. Porter, who's a Harvard professor, he always talks about efficiencies. And, if you have to think, so if you have to go in your closet like my wife does and decide what I'm going to wear, she wastes 20 minutes.
Yeah.
So at night I'm going and boom, it's out. So very structured, all that laid out. And then I'm usually at my desk in the office by 6:45.
Wow.
And then that's the one major change that happened in this time was from 6:45 to 8. Like I'm really like, I don't meditate the way I'd like to,
Hmm.
but that's been my time where I'm planning out some things that I have to, making sure my mental thoughts are down, my best ideas. And then it's usually, from 8 to 6, it's game time. It's usually coaching, meetings, vision, always remembering the number, a couple of things that are important, right? You always ask yourself, what are you doing to grow the business? What are you spending your time on? So, really being good, and then delegating everything out. And then I usually take calls, basically everyone that knows me knows till 9:30 and 5 a.m. You can call me anytime before 9:30 and before 5 a.m. and after 5 a.m.
Okay.
So, and it's just going all day and just trying to impact change and influence things. And I'm really big on touching people. So I try to be out of I try to book 30 to 45-minute meetings so that when I'm in the main office or at one of my sites, I'm walking the floor and touching a lot of people, just in time coaching.
Yeah.
So things like that.
I like that. That's cool. And then how do you manage having a family alongside all this?
Yeah. So, another dadism, right? When I came up to Connecticut, I'm only about 12 miles from the main office. So he would say to me, if you can make city money in the country, you have life figured out. Because everyone that lived in the middle of Brooklyn commuted to Midtown. That was like an hour and a half each way, right?
Wow.
So I think what was pretty cool for me, I never understood what that meant until I had children. So it was really nice as my kids were growing up. I was able to cut out of the office, hit all their games, go to school events, and still come back and do my thing. Now, obviously, I couldn't imagine that. I never worked from home this last 6 months, especially the first 90 days. I was really efficient. I never thought I would be, and business didn't miss a beat, right? It's not my favorite thing to do, but it worked. So now I know I could work anywhere, but I made it work, and I didn't miss any of their stuff. I was always there. I did miss dinner a lot in the beginning, but our family was never we never sat down. We always ate sporadically, but we tried to be there as much as we could. And I think we did a good job of balancing that and teaching them the right stuff we needed to along the way.
Yeah, no, it's super cool. It sounds like too, just that, again, that structure and even a little bit of being rigid. I always say that helps you. It creates more time because like you said, that 20 minutes to find my shirt, that's 20 minutes you picked up for life.
You got it. Like he teaches, if you travel with me for business, even if it's 3 days, I'm a clothing fanatic, but I pack in a carry-on. It's a backpack and a carry-on. So he says, every time you check a bag, it takes you 35 minutes.
Yeah.
Add that up over all your business trips. And, I logically get it. I think I'm very logical. So I just think I saved the 2 weeks of my life, not waiting for my bag to come out. Right.
Yeah.
So I just try to be efficient and use my time where I like to use it versus have to.
Yep. I love that. I always tell people, hey, show me your schedule and I'll show you your life.
Yeah,
right?
That's the truth.
That's the truth. It's all right there. So if there's inefficiencies there's inefficiencies everywhere. And a lot of times you're reactive as opposed to proactive.
No doubt about it.
That's super cool. So my last question for you is this. I call it the Becoming a Champion show. I feel like we're all on that journey to become our champion self. What does the word champion mean to you?
That's a good one. Well, I start to think of winners when you say that. First off, I have this visual, right, of raising a banner or people jumping on top of each other. But it's interesting. It's not, I don't think of them by themselves, right? I think of them as people that have partnered together, and it could be even someone that played tennis or the piano, but some people with them with that journey. So what I think about when I think of the word champion, I think of the first thing I think of the time and sacrifice and dedication that person put to become a champion at whatever it may be. It could be you graduated with a 4.0 and a perfect score on your ACT, or you won the NBA championship and you waited all these years to do that, right? So I think that's when the word champion means to me means lots of sacrifice, hard journey, mental, you have to be mentally tough to win at whatever you're trying to win at, right? And I also think that it's not, winning or becoming a champion, you have to have so much adversity you go through that you have to be willing to that BHAG, that championship, whatever it is, has to be big enough and bold enough that you're willing to sacrifice those things. But back to what I said earlier, it would be crappy to be a champion and not be able to share that with anyone.
Yeah.
And I mean, back to what we talked about earlier, being a complete person, if you weren't hugging your teammates or your spouse and your children because they didn't like you anymore because you were a champion at the expense of all that stuff, right? Mm-hmm. So I think you have to be very careful to understand your priorities. And is that goal for you? Or are you doing it for all the right reasons, whatever those reasons may be?
Yeah.
And if it's money, that's probably not the right reason. If it's fame, that might not be the right reason. And it might be lonely as a champion, right? So I think that's critical.
Yeah, that's cool. I love that. That's awesome right there. That's
Thank
cool.
you.